Hello and welcome to Inspiring Interviews, Conversations about Breath, where each week we have a conversation with a well-known breath worker about their journey into breathwork, about what inspires them and what they would like to inspire in others. My name's Ben and I am the founder of Breathing Space School of Breathwork, and today I am joined by Anastasis Tzanis. Now, Anastasis is a yoga teacher. He's a practitioner and researcher, and he uses breathwork to help people develop their physical and mental capacities. He's been teaching since 2013. His oldest regular student has been 7 years old, and his oldest is an 87-year-old woman. He has been delivering workshops in 6 countries, and he consults as a wellness advisor for work teams in successful corporations, including Apple. He's a visiting lecturer in hot pod yoga, and he's dedicated his life to understanding the link between mind and body and the role of breath towards strengthening the connection between the two and proving that the mind and body are one on an empirical level. Now, I met Anastasis about just over a year ago when I went to one of his workshops. And although I've been a breath worker for several years, I'd always been avoiding doing all Wim Hoff training because I was very scared to go into an ice bath. But under Anastasis's very gentle care, I got in for about, I think, almost 2 minutes actually. And it was a joyful experience. It wasn't difficult. It wasn't stressful. It was almost blissful actually. So that was one big experience that I had with Anastasis. But the other thing that I really liked about Anastasis was how he brought the empirical side of breathwork, the scientific and the physiological side of it, and how his passion for that made it a really exciting experience for me to learn about. So that's the reason Anastasis, I've invited Anastasis on here, and I've actually asked him to be a visiting lecturer on my facilitator training as well. So let's introduce you to Anastasis. Hi, Anastasis.
Hi, Ben. Nice speaking to you again.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on. I really appreciate that. So you're only actually my second guest on this program in its current. So, you know, I'm really pleased I managed to get you in at first. So really what I want to do in this interview is talk about your journey into breathwork, because for me, hearing people's stories is what is inspiring. So before we start asking you all the interesting questions, let's start with Anastasis, the 101 of Anastasis, the kind of what do we need to know? Tell us some of the facts, tell us the facts about Anastasis. What do you think we need to know about you?
I actually, just by asking this question, it made me think of something that maybe I have not realized until now. So basically, I probably it is safe to say that I've lived a big part of my life in polarities. So, and more of the young side of things. So I was driven to young sports, like martial arts, maybe younger profession. I was a trader in a German bank. Even when I went to service the army, I was a paratrooper. So, you know, I think there is a common theme among some of these things, and maybe dopamine is like has something to do about it. And of course, there is no bad or good neurotransmitters, no good or bad activities, but too much of one thing can potentially polarize us. Anyway, so this is where how I lived my life for the first 30 years. And yeah, then I start seeing that, you know, there is another side to the coin that we need to nurture and need to respect. So that's pretty much it. It was around that time when I was 30 years old that I moved into yoga teaching, and I studied nutritional therapy, so I became a nutritional therapist.
Okay. Now, before we get to that, you've just hinted a lot of things there that I think are really interesting. So you've been a paratrooper, you've been a banker, your accent. Now I know you're Greek, aren't you?
Yeah, yeah.
So you've obviously changed countries and you moved over to Greece. How old are you now?
Uh, 40. I'm
40?
just about 40 years old.
40 years old. Looking very good as well. And you live
Thank
in
you.
London.
Yeah, I've been living in London for 13 and a half years now.
Okay. So tell us about, we're here to, I mean, that sounds like a great life story as well for people, being a paratrooper, and moving into banking. I think I'd like to come on to those. But before we kind of go into your life story, maybe you could tell me about one of the experiences, your first experience of breath. What was your first experience of breath work?
Hmm. The first experience of breath work, I think breath work found me in a couple of different times in my life. Probably the first structured one was when I was doing martial arts. And I remember my instructor at the time was saying that when someone is about to receive a punch, they needed to exhale and contract their abdominals. And sometimes some of the participants in the class would not do that, and as a result, they would feel a lot more pain. And he was saying, "Well, there is a reason why I told you to do so." So anyway, that was the place where you learned the hard way, and you try to connect maybe pain and breath, which I think is a very fascinating area. And I think a lot of yoga teachers deal with it on a regular basis without realizing. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, please.
Yeah, no. So there you are, and I'm guessing you were quite a young, a boy then.
Yeah, like a teenager, 18 years old, something like that.
And your martial arts teacher taught you when you're about to receive a punch, exhale.
And keep and hold the exhalation and keep your abdominals contracted.
Wow. And you can remember that right now, can you?
Yeah, I can remember that. I mean, it's like it keeps coming back because I think ultimately as a researcher, I call myself a researcher, although I'm not in a lab on a daily basis, because that's what you want to be doing. You want to see all these things that you observe in nature, but things that you have heard from people that you think have some knowledge, and you try to explain them and think, if he said that, I may not be receiving punches now, but in which things that I'm teaching as a yoga teacher, the same thing, the same principle applies. Where do I'm very concerned about the integrity of the abdominals. And the reality is I'm very concerned in many positions that my students do or I do. So the same thing comes back in full circle many years later, and hopefully breath helps us, or all the knowledge that we have accumulated over time helps us explain the why.
Sure. Okay. Who was your martial arts teacher? Tell us about him.
Oh, Christos Grivas, I think. Oh my God, I would not have thought I would remember his name. I think it was Christos Grivas, but anyway, yes, it was some. It's an interesting thing, right? You mentioned at the beginning that we met through this workshop that a lot of the Wim Hof material was covered, and this guy was also a similar guy to Wim, not of course with 26 Guinness records, but a very experimental, a guy that lived for experiences, a guy that 40 or so years ago traveled many times to Japan to study and learn and experience things, and they believe that the proof is in the pudding, and you have to put your body through challenges in order to make it through and learn. Something that obviously Wim has done to an amazing level. So this is it. That's who that teacher of mine was at the time, and I learned a lot from him. Of course, I didn't stay with martial arts. I changed martial arts, but the point is that breath is is in martial arts is a big part, I think, in quite a few of them. And a lot of martial artists, yeah, they do breath work without necessarily knowing that they do. They do. Do you mind if I digress? Since I didn't expect to speak about martial arts because it's not my expertise.
It's part of who you are, though, Anastasis.
I'll share with you. I was about to say that martial artists sometimes do very good breath work without knowing it.
Yeah.
And in traditional wisdom, there is some gem sometimes. So anyway, I was speaking with an old friend of mine, and he's now residing in Australia. And he was asking me some questions about breathing. And I was telling him, the breath work that you're doing at the moment is good, probably feels good, but probably it's not going to help you with sleep or with stress or with. I said, like, it's showing. So I gave him some other examples, and he said, "Oh, this is what my Aikido teacher used to do us all the time. He used to make us sprint up and down, and then make us sit still, and like make us breath very, very quiet." I said, "Your Aikido teacher is a brilliant breathwork teacher as well." So he was doing it. He never considered that a breathwork because he was part of his Aikido training. There you go.
Amazing. Okay, tell us about little Anastasis, who was doing martial arts. Whereabouts in Greece were you? And so tell us a bit about your story as a young boy and doing martial arts in Greece.
Yeah, so I think there was a very high levels of stress, not because the situation was that bad in my upbringing, but still I was a very anxious boy. I was not able to sleep very well. I remember having problems with acid reflux. At the time, I didn't know that it was a problem. I remember again using my breath and holding my breath, and remembering holding my breath was one of the things that was helping me the most deal with it. So it was through physical activities, including martial arts, including other sports, that I kind of found myself. It was part of my ID. And nowadays it is how, if you were to ask me what are my passions, is really teaching, training, and researching. It's like this training and exercise became part of who I am. And I'm a practitioner. I'm a teacher as well at the moment.
So that was at a young age, really. You kind of got that, I suppose, passion for exploration, I suppose, more than anything. What do I want to? Yeah, can you give me a taste of? So, little Anastasis is quite anxious, you say, and quite nervous. Maybe not nervous. What was the word that you used? Anxious, I think.
Yeah. There is definitely a worry. Worry is so. You know how there are different elements in Chinese medicine, and each element is linked with some emotion. And I think as personality, I have a lot of earth in me, and as a result, earth is linked with worry. And yeah, this was definitely something that was part of the way I lived the first 23 or so years of my life.
Okay.
But obviously, it's again moving forward. It is when you have went through something like that, it's then when you develop usually a lot of these voids that we experience in an early age turn into our strengths later on in life. And I think that helped me develop more compassion for people that have similar symptoms as adults with the ones that I had as a young person.
Do you know, for me, that's one of the signs of the greatest teachers, when they can transform their own suffering into gifts that they then give out to everyone else. And they'll use their own, their own wounds, and healing their own wounds becomes a journey of healing for others as well. So I really resonate with that. Okay, so there's little Anastasis, anxious with way too much earth in him. I'm interested in your experience in the army and becoming a paratrooper. Now, national service isn't something that we have in the UK or in Canada, where I am now. So tell us a bit about your experience in the army and how that helped form the man that you are now.
Yeah, definitely a year I will not forget. There is this national obligation. So every Greek, I don't know if any of our audience is of Greek citizenship, but it is an obligation for Greek men to service the army, and so did I go there. Of course, joining the paratroopers unit is not an obligation, but that was my idea of making the most out of this time, and I was accepted, and I went through the training. I mean, obviously, I have my own feelings about how the army is run and how things are functioning there. But the reality is that there is a lesson in everything. I think, at least, even in the current situation which we are going through, I think there is a great opportunities and great lessons. And yeah, the army was a place where I think there is no time for thinking. There is no time for refining things. There is no, like, you know, as long as you're standing, you're fine. Breath or how you do things is much less important, and just doing things and sticking within a certain framework of fitting the profile of a good soldier is like as good as it gets, and as far as it should go. So this did not necessarily comply with my maybe curious mind, maybe my mind for independent thinking, maybe my mind for like yeah, I don't know. Anyway, but it was, I learned a lot, and I think it was a very beneficial time for me, although very hard. And that was it. It was a very physical year. Obviously, there was a lot of training going on during that year. That was it. That was 2003, 2004, just before the Olympics.
2003 and 2004. Okay, and then tell us about the move from being a paratrooper to working in finance.
So, yeah, I mean, I wanted to continue. I had finished already a degree in economics. I wanted to move on in this direction. So I moved to the States. I studied economics. I studied finance, and then I moved into banking. I worked for a hedge fund for a bit in New York, and then a German bank in London. So again, this was another very high stressful environment, like similar to the army, similar with my upbringing in Greece. There was a theme, a pattern that carried on. Of course, different type of stress. The reality is that I lived through two crises during my 6.5 years in banking, and from 2005 to 2012. And yeah, this was, it is where I realized what really stress does to people long term. Because I used to say something like that. It was, to me, it sounds stupid. At the time, I found it was maybe even intelligent, that I said I thrive in stress. And probably what I meant is that I enjoy being under pressure. Probably I meant that there is a certain amount of stress, like stress, that makes me perform better. And this is not necessarily a wrong thing, but obviously long term, or being able to operate only under this situation, is probably not something very intelligent. And that's what I was observing at the time in my years in banking. I stayed there for 6.5 years, that people that were 30 years old looked like 60 years old. And this was not one or two people, it was like majority. And a lot of them were very successful and in this corporate ladder. But then I realized I could not it's not how I saw myself. And life moves us into things that we never expected. So when I started when I tried the yoga to improve my flexibility, I realized that the benefits go way further than that. So I was experiencing a much higher level of centeredness. I was feeling more happy with myself after this 1 hour. And this is something I'm sure, you are a teacher, you have been a teacher in different forms, actually. You are a very talented teacher. I've seen you in real life, Ben. But I'm sure you also, some of the audience will be teachers. And sometimes we forget how important we are to our students. I'm guilty.
Yeah, definitely.
In a good way. I'm not saying that we are special. I mean, I think every profession is special, but this 1 hour that they come to us may mean so much more than just 1 hour.
Yeah, really. You see, really, this is a great story, going from paratrooper to working in banking through some really stressful times in some really exciting romantic places. Going off in New York in the 2000s, around the time of the financial crash, or around then, must have been a tremendously exciting time. And obviously London is one of the great hubs in the world, so that's a very exciting. My picture of Anastasis in his 20s is very ambitious, very capable, very strong, very confident as well. But something changed for you. You found the yoga mat. Was there a particular teacher that inspired you? What was the process that took you from being in this stressful, ambitious, pressured situation of working in finance to making the move to being a teacher? And I know from my own experience and dozens of people that I've spoken to, it's not an uncommon trajectory. You're in this kind of high pressure, very successful corporate world. Many people burn out and then discover yoga. But I'd really like to hear your journey from being, one of the titans of industry, the masters of the universe. Who is it who called it the masters of the universe? It's from Bonfire of the Vanities, I think. How was this move from being a master of the universe, working in high finance in New York and London, to transitioning to be a yoga teacher? I'd love to hear a bit more about
that. It was a very natural one. And a few people that sometimes through LinkedIn or different sources, they come and say, I'm thinking of making the leap. Any advice, or how did it work for you? I said, for me, it was not like, I never felt that I was making a leap. I think that the quick answer, the very quick answer is that this transition happened very organically, because I was always, and I try to still, I don't know to what extent I'm succeeding, to be very true to myself and be honest with myself. I know it seems a cliche, I know, but I think that's very true. So I will fast forward so that I don't bore you, but when I got into yoga, what hooked me initially, I was doing a type of yoga that was very like alpha structured, like, being strong was cool, yeah? So that was what got me there. And I was dedicated to that style for 2 years. But then when I discovered my teachers at the time were supporting this style, if you want, or they were like a little bit like competitive, if you want. But these were my teachers at the time. And these were the teachers that allowed me. Any other teacher maybe would not have done it for me. I would not, if I had been to someone else's class, these were the teachers I was ready to receive. That's why I also say there are no bad teachers. We get the teachers we deserve, and as teachers, we get the students we deserve.
So I love that. I love that. We get the teachers we deserve, Anastasis, and we really do, don't we?
Absolutely. These were the teachers I deserved at the time. At the moment, don't ask me to go to their class. I would probably not be able to stay for very long. But this was the time that they served me, because they helped me make this transition. And then later on, when I went to other teachers, and there were other styles and other philosophies and other approaches and I got hooked. Now, one thing that helped me in this path, because it moved quite quickly, to be honest. Sometimes I'm thinking, how many years have I been teaching? How many years have I been practicing? Like, things ticked quite quickly. Is that at any time I gave 1,000%. I gave in every class I was going, in everything that I was doing, like in my practice. I think I try to do the same as a teacher. You've seen me, I'm very passionate about what I do. I try to be 1,000% on it. Yeah, so when you're driven by something, whether it is a human, whether it is a new hobby, whether it is a new activity, when you're driven, you become very good at it. You become you become one with it. You know, if you get obsessed with being a carpenter, and within 1 month, you will have transformed your house, and someone will walk in that doesn't know you. They say, "Hi, Ben, you're a carpenter, like full time?" And maybe that's just your hobby, but you are so driven. So that was the case for me.
I see. So you got really passionate about yoga, and you did a very physical, very demanding side of yoga, which men in their 20s kind of need to do. Really, there's that kind of real and that was my experience as an Ashtanga in my 20s. That was my gateway drug as well. Was there a particular teacher who inspired you, or anything that really pulled you in at that point?
I think, like I said, at different times, I was picking up things from different teachers, helping me to find the things that I have inside. I think whatever we get from others, whatever we see in others, are things that we have inside.
Yeah.
So these teachers worked as they were holding the torch, and they were pointing with their own teaching at things that I had. I would say that the most influential yoga teacher that I ever had was Eileen Gauthier. Those of people that practice in London are very likely to know her. People that practice Ashtanga in London are very, very, very likely to know her. I studied Ashtanga with her for a while, but I studied other classes as well that she was teaching. That was a very long period. That I would say that she was the most influential teacher I had.
Sure. Okay, well, something I like to do, if this is okay, if there is someone who pops up, can we just take a breath with them to acknowledge the influence that they have brought onto you and who you are?
Sure.
Okay, let's take a breath with her then. I'm imagining the primary series running through my head now. Okay, so in London, and you've moved from working in finance, working in the city, to being a yoga teacher, and a very successful yoga teacher from what I understand. I know that you were voted one of London's best yoga teachers, and I've known that you worked with big corporate clients and done exceptionally well. Tell us about then your move into breath work. How did that happen? Was there an event? Was there something that sparked you? What brought you into becoming more than just a yoga teacher to being a breathwork teacher?
Yeah, actually, one thing that I was receiving very much over the first few years of my teaching, as a feedback from my students, was that I don't teach breathing. I don't say anything about breathing. They said, so strange with you, Anastasis, you speak very little about breathing. I said, so I don't have anything to say. I don't know. I mean, I have nothing to say.
How ironic that is. You didn't teach anything about breathwork.
I didn't teach anything. I remember, I'll give you another example. I was already teaching 5 years plus. And there was one thing I was going to cover someone else's another teacher's class for an introductory yoga. So there was this group, this course, and I would cover just one. And he said, just teach warrior one, his games and Ujjayi breath. And I'm sure I can find this email. I have to actually find this email. I replied back and said, I'm sorry, I don't teach Ujjayi breath. I don't know how to teach Ujjayi breath. Was 5 years in. I said, I don't understand it. So I'd rather stay away. You know, in this beginner's course, I don't care if they're beginners or not. I don't get it. So I don't teach. So anyway, so how I got into much deeper water, of course. You probably have heard me saying the story before. I don't listen to podcasts like this or any podcast. I don't usually listen to podcasts, but somehow, you know how podcasts are sometimes on YouTube and here and there. And I got a glimpse of this halfway through a random podcast of Wim being interviewed. So Wim was interviewed, and that was 2015 or 14. So before Wim was like viral, definitely before. So this guy asks Wim, says like, you know, exposure to cold and monitoring your body temperature when there is cold exposure is something that people have been doing in yoga for a long time. But at the moment you go to a yoga class and there is none of that being taught. You know, doesn't matter. Like, and Wim said, yeah, you know, like people are holding on into the truth and they are not sharing. I said, fuck, that's right. I teach, and I, you know, what I teach is not like, I don't know anything about controlling your exposure to cold. This actually happened coincidentally, like a few months after I had started taking lukewarm showers. Mm-hmm. And I was taking lukewarm showers only because my mother always told me that it is good for you. And I was always taking hot showers. So if any of the audience is hearing and they said, I was speaking actually with a lady, like just before we jumped on this call, saying, I've all my life was taking hot showers, and so did I told her. So anyway, so I thought, okay, so then I jumped into the training, which was the first international training that Wim ran. So I did the first international training. I got certified at the end of 2016. So probably that first, and this, so then there was this period of experimenting with cold. And as you know, from the mid times that we have met, I consider cold a great tool to get control of the breath. It's not the only way to work with breath. Someone can have zero exposure to cold and do amazing things with their breath, but it is one stimulus. It's like people can see it like kettlebells or dumbbells. You can get stronger without using them, but if you use them, you definitely will have to get some idea about how to deal with your muscles. Similar thing with cold, you have to get some idea about how to do with your cold. So I was doing a lot of practice on my own with cold. I was not practicing the Wim Hof method, breathing, but I was regularly. And then I did the training, and during the training, during and after the training, I had not got the answers that I needed. So what's special about the Wim Hof breathing? I could not answer the question. I was an instructor, and it was like all very blurry.
Okay, hang on just a second there. So it was a podcast with Wim Hof that inspired you. Okay. And I also just want to pick up on something that you said there. So most people use breath control to manage being exposed to cold water, but you're using it the other way around. You're using the cold water to help people control their breathing. That little twist there is subtle, but it's really powerful, Anastasis, and I really like that. But yeah, let's talk about, you were on the first international training with Wim Hof before he went viral, before he turned into the kind of breathwork superstar. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, and to give us a bit of color about Wim. What's he like as a teacher, and what was that first training like?
He's a character. He's an amazing person. I mean, obviously, he has a lot of drive for life to be going through all these endeavors, and to be trying to communicate this message, which, in my opinion, if I was to, I'm trying to be a little bit careful when I pass on things that Wim has said, because sometimes he will say the same thing with slightly different words, and I you know, people usually expect much more structure from him. He's a very genuine guy, very, like, he says whatever comes to his mind and doesn't try to formalize necessarily things. But I think his message really is that whatever you're going through, you can deal with it. Go to nature, be exposed to cold, do some breath work, get hold of your life, right? He's, you know, so I think that's his message. He's not very keen on the excessive use of pharmaceuticals. He's not an excessive, he has been through a few difficulties himself, which I'm not able to reproduce because I'm not familiar with them fully. But he has been through some, and he's now wanting people to be in control of their life. That, I think that, in my opinion, that's his message.
Yeah,
And that's a very good message.
that
And he's a
is.
very, in that sense, he's a very genuine life. He likes women, he likes food, he likes drinking, he likes going out and taking push-ups in the snow and jumping into waterfalls and joking, and like, he's a great person to be around, for sure.
How fascinating! So I'm seeing he sounds like he's got a huge character. He, you know, has got a huge appetite for life, and I can feel that coming through you. Actually, you know, I'm getting a real sense of that. Okay, well, tell us, what was your experience of the Wim Hof method, and how, yeah, your experience of the Wim Hof method and where that took you on your breathwork journey after the training.
So really, I was very much attached to the cold training before I got certified and after I got certified. And at the same time, I have very, very few times in my life practiced the breathing. And to me, there was like a little bit of a disconnect. Now, if you ask me what is the connection between the two, I can probably give you some links, but the point is that while the cold exposure had a kind of a life of its own, and I thought it was still linked with breath, I started getting more interested into why things work, why this breathing, and why other breathings. And yeah, this, as you know, led me to study with Patrick McKeown, who is an Irishman, a brilliant teacher as well, a very different personality from Wim. And yeah, I studied with him a couple of times. So I did 2 different courses with him. I followed him as well. I attended quite a few of his workshops and so on. And I think it is there that I start getting it. So it was through my time with Patrick, who, funny enough, he says it himself. He doesn't know about yoga. He has never I don't know if he has ever practiced it, but he does not. But he has such a deep understanding of breath work that then I was able to say, okay, now I know how to teach Ujjayi breath. Now, of course, I did further my own research, but then I became much more comfortable with delivering more breathing only workshops and classes and day-long things and all these things. So it was there that I got like a much more in-depth understanding and confidence.
Sure. Okay, so you did your Wim Hof training, and that kind of started you on your journey to becoming a breathwork facilitator or teacher, and then you moved on to Patrick McKeown. So there will be some people watching who've never heard of Patrick McKeown and the oxygen advantage. How would you explain Patrick and his philosophy and what he does in just a few in a few sentences? Or maybe you could even compare it to Wim Hof. How is he different, and where are the similarities and where are the differences?
As people, as personalities.
Both.
Yeah. So in terms of personality, I mean, Patrick is a family man, and he lives in the outskirts of Galway. I've been there, middle of nowhere, beautiful house. So he's a very, I would say he's like, while Wim wants to practice and do things and expose himself to challenges. I think Patrick is more of a researcher and is more of a person that sits back and reflects and focuses on very specific things that he is very good at. So he's a model of humbleness and of a model of someone that can have a very focused mind. Patrick,
Sure.
he's extremely focused. These are two things that stand out for him. He's like laser focused in his work, in his consultations, in his and at the same time he's very humble. He's an incredible instructor. A lot of people know him nowadays, but I don't think a lot of people know how humble he is. He has an amazing insight in people's ability to breathe and how this affect their emotional and life and overall well-being. You only have to observe it in real life to see him deliver a workshop, and actually not even a workshop, not a workshop where he teaches the system, a workshop where he helps people, like consults people. And there you will see a next to none, like he will hear people's breathing walking upstairs. So he doesn't have visual contact with them and he will be picking their breath. I bet like in a room of 10 people, he knows while he delivers a workshop, how breaths per minute each one of them takes. I'm pretty sure.
Wow, he sounds like a really inspiring teacher, Anastasis.
Pretty sure. I'm very confident that this is the case. Yeah, he's incredible. That's why. But not many people know him. People get stuck in a little bit into the technicalities of oxygen advantage and the Buteco and this and that. But he has consulted thousands and thousands of people.
Yeah. So it's him as a teacher rather than just what he is teaching that really inspired you. I can really feel that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, well, tell us a little bit about his philosophy or his method and the oxygen advantage. What does that actually mean, the oxygen advantage?
Yeah, so first of all, it's worth letting people know that Patrick has been a Buteco instructor for a very long time. So the Buteco method, developed by Konstantin Buteco, is a system that promotes light breathing. It promotes nasal breathing. It will use practices where the diaphragm is restricted potentially, and so that it can work against whatever restriction you put. It can be like even like a belt around, and so that it gets stronger. And it has been used extensively. Well, in asthma, in people with asthma, and I think there are two more categories of people in Western Europe that know Buteco for, and the other one is arthritis and cancer.
Right. Okay.
So I had the opportunity to have in workshops that I delivered people that had met Buteco himself.
Right.
And
okay.
they had told me stories about how he was running his camps in Ukraine. And I think it was in Ukraine, and his camps. And it was very interesting. It was very strict, very like, going around at night and closing people's mouths if they were open, kids. And they were like immersions type of things.
Sure.
So Patrick has been a Buteco method for many years. He has written many books on Buteco. And the story goes as follows. And by the way, I think he might be someone that you may want to interview at some point. So that can be something that I can help if you want.
Definitely.
Yeah. And so at some point while he was delivering the workshop, I believe that someone contacted him and he said, you know what, like a lot of athletes, you're speaking about people that are not well. But a lot of athletes, which in theory are very fit, and they are fit actually, they struggle with their breathing. A lot of the things that you're describing about improving the quality of sleep and improving you know, your anxiety, working with anxiety, are things that athletes struggle with.
Mm.
And this led into Patrick working over, I think it was a period of 5 years, that it led towards the development of oxygen advantage and writing the book. And oxygen advantage is basically like, you know, it's like a system of some exercises on the back of the Buteyko method. So in my opinion, he didn't digress that far. He just tried to challenge the exercises further, you know. So if you think about like holding your breath for 5 seconds, you end up holding for 20 seconds just because you can't do it, but the exercise is the same. So this is what he did. He developed this system for, which is basically, let's call it a Buteyko for athletes. And in the sense, because obviously when someone is exercising, their metabolic capacity increases, so their need for oxygen increases, so they can get, you know, I think that's the idea behind, they get the oxygen advantage by training their body in this method.
Fascinating. So it's taking what was originally a therapeutic technique with Buteyko for people with, you know, asthma or, you know, other conditions, and then taking it to a new audience, and especially, I suppose, just an audience away from Eastern Europe and from, you know, Ukraine and Russia to a Western audience. And what was the training like with Patrick? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's so the training is a very standard one. I think I was a little bit lucky because I managed to do Patrick's training of oxygen advantage. I think it was like either the second or third year. It was probably the second time he had come to UK, or the, yeah, something like that. And I'm saying I was lucky because he was in that training, he was his true self, in the sense, I'm not saying that now he edits himself, but he was giving what he thinks it's important. And this is a lot of freaking stuff. Like, I remember like 2 hours within the first day of the training, and I was like, fucking hell, like I'm losing the plot here. Like, if I have another 2.5 days here, I'm gonna be like gone. And that's the reality. I think that was a feedback that he received over time, again and again. And I think after observing future trainings of him, I think he has washed things down, and like, he says, okay, guys, you know, you can take your time after the training to go and pick things up on your own. But yeah, it was a full-on, like, science-heavy, like him speaking at 100 miles per hour. Because don't forget that Patrick has delivered presentations in doctors and in medical professions. He has participated in studies. He's a researcher. He's not like, yeah.
Okay, that sounds quite intense. If it was going at 100 miles for you and blowing your mind, I can't only imagine what it was like, Anastasis, because your capacity for science, physiological geekery and nerdery is is way beyond mine.
I'm a turtle compared to him. He's going like he can go. I think, like I said, now he's like kind of got too much feedback of like, yeah. But I'm telling you, he's like, he has all the equations, anything that has to do with terminology, anatomy, physiology, biochemistry of breathing. Things are like, you know, speaking about the simplest thing on earth. He is like flat out very, very well in full understanding of everything that goes on, and also on the importance. Because what happens is, like, he's a practitioner, and I think there are a lot of people that know what he knows in terms of the technicalities,
Yeah.
but they don't treat anyone. So this is something that is not to be overestimated. Patrick has helped people from not sleeping to sleeping, chronic panic attacks to non-panic attacks. ADHD to non, like he has walked the path back and forth many times. So it's one thing when I can draw on the graph like a curve and say, and another thing when this turns into changing someone's lives.
Yeah.
That's what, and Patrick does both.
Yeah. Which the best teachers do, you know, they walk the walk, as you say. So let's just go on a bit from Patrick. And so you've obviously going from being a really great yoga teacher, but not teaching even Ujjayi breath, to training with Vim and then training with Patrick. Tell us about what's happened in your life since you have trained with these two, you know, huge people in the breathwork world, and tell us about what you do now, maybe.
So I think it is first of all, I want to say that all of this time that I have spent studying with these people, and the theory is very much ingrained of layers over layers over layers in my own teaching. So although I do deliver breathing works, one-to-one sessions, or sometimes occasionally I have some open to public workshops like the ones that we run together. In my when I teach yoga, I think there is an underlying layer of breath work that is not always obvious, but it is there. In my mind, is very clear. And depending on someone's capacity, it will take him or her from not speaking to him at all about breath to be asking people to hold their breath for long periods of time, or like suppress their breath for long periods of time, depending on what we are trying to achieve. So for me now, breath work is like a layer on top of the asana practice. And this is something that, you know, like a lot of people, I'm sure there are some, or I think that there might be some yoga teachers that listen to us and they can say, okay, you know, pranayama is part of yoga. So why do you differentiate between the two? And I don't differentiate. I really don't. For me, breathing is breathing. And like, you know, you call it pranayama, you call it buteyko, call it whatever you want. But I want to say that a lot of the times in yoga, I find that things get very rigid. And a lot of the times breathing becomes rigid, or breathing becomes isolated from the asana practice. While I don't think it has to be. And I don't think that it also has to stick to a certain pattern. So this is really where I think my understanding maybe varies from some other teachers. So while when I was teaching Ashtanga, and maybe if I was to come and teach, you know, if someone tells me, come and teach me Ashtanga, I will still tell him, inhale, extend the arms above your head, exhale, fold forward, punch on the floor. Inhale, lift your chest. I will still follow whatever pattern he's expecting to hear. But I know that this is not the only way to practice, and this is not even the right necessarily way to practice. This is one way. And this is a set pattern that maybe it is not even right for him, because maybe his respiratory capacity cannot take it. And maybe at some point as he keeps going, he will improve, or maybe it's even too easy for him. It's like asking someone to hold just the warrior one when he can do many other things. Is that the right practice for him? Maybe not, maybe, but it's nothing wrong with warrior one. So that's that, and you know that, like from the times we met, like I see things as a progression.
Yeah.
In terms of the breath work. So it's my obligation, I find now, to do more research, because I think that I have this a little bit of I would not say unique, but yeah, maybe a little bit of a niche in terms of combining like all the amazing things that asana practice and all the yogic breathing can offer to us, and on top of that bring all the oxygen advantage, Wim Hof and so on, as extra tools to help us improve respiratory capacity or help us achieve the yoga pose. Sometimes I find that it is a cue in the breathing that I have to tell to some of my students in order to achieve a new pose. It's not a new technical thing. It's not about what they will do with their shoulders or with their hips. It's the breathing. So it's a tool. which can be used to help them achieve what they want.
Okay. Yeah, and I've experienced your teaching. I know that you bring breath as a layer and a level of everything that you teach. It's not always something separate, but it is just there with you all the time. So you teach like yoga in London, and you run workshops. Give us a flavor of what your life looks like now.
I am teaching during the day, so from Friday to Monday to Friday. So some rare occasions on Saturday I teach some workshops, and in the afternoons I will be doing more online work. So if someone cannot see me in person, I will be seeing them online, or I will be doing research. So I have managed to structure my schedule in such a way so that I combine my passions, which is teaching, in person researching, and somewhere in between, whenever I can, I train as well, which happens actually on a daily basis, because this is also very important for me.
Okay, so you teach yoga, you teach workshops, and you do one-on-one work as well.
Yeah.
And you're based in London. If people want to get hold of you, how should they find you?
My website is the easiest one, I think. It is www.a for Anastasis, my last name, which is Tzanis.com. But if people are, if people are interested on my take on breathing, I think at the moment the most material are on YouTube. So on YouTube they can see, and actually I'm already going to be uploading 2 new videos today, and so I think YouTube is where those that are interested in breathing, it's YouTube where they should go, and they can find links to the website.
Sure, I'll put a link up as well. Okay, well, before we finish, would you like to share a breath exercise with people?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, let me think. I'll share one exercise, which again, I keep saying, I think I have come up with it myself. Maybe it's not, maybe I picked it up from someone else, but I don't know, but I really like it. And I think it serves a few different things. So I call it, it's improve your concentration. And it usually, I think it's worth in the beginning lasting 3 minutes. And then afterwards, so I will describe it. We don't have to run it.
We can do it for 3 minutes. If it's a 3-minute practice, let's have a live demonstration or a live.
All right. Okay. That's fine. So you can close your eyes, find it all fine. You can do that exercise either seated or lying down, and start following your breath. And as you observe the air coming in and out of your nose, the breathing most likely will slow down. But after a few breaths, I would like you to intentionally start slowing down your breath even more. And I would like you to slow down your breath to the extent that you can stay calm, because if you try to slow down too much, too quickly, you may start tensing up. And from the moment that I will say start till the moment that I will say finish, I would like you to start counting your breaths. So an inhalation, pause, exhalation, second pause is a count of 1. Let's start now. Maybe we do it for a bit less than 3 minutes. So you're using your breath as an anchor. So you're following your breath and you're counting. Chances are that this breathing will have a very calming effect for you. If your mind drifts away, you can continue, go back and carry on counting your breaths. And one thing that I like to remind people in this exercise is that this is as much of a breathing exercise as much of a respiratory one, a mental exercise. The way we think and the way we breathe are very much interlinked. The moment we change our thoughts, our breath changes, and the other way around. Couple of more seconds. And now you can stop counting. You can stay with your eyes closed. Observe your breath. Probably it's a lot slower than when you started. And at your own time, you can open your eyes. So I don't know if you practiced it while I was speaking, Ben.
Yeah, I was.
How many breaths did you take?
I think 3 breaths. I was counting to counting to 10 on the inhale and 12 on the exhale.
Okay, so if you took 3 breaths, then you took 3 breaths in 2 minutes. So this exercise lasted 2 minutes. So it's a minute and a half, 1.5 breaths per minute. That's very, very low. Usually it is a little bit higher, but the reality is that it helps on a few. I like this exercise a lot because first of all, it helps people concentrate on their breath. A lot of people lose track of the count, and then it reminds people that they don't need to breathe too many times and they can still stay alive. A lot of people are impressed with that as well.
Yeah, I found afterwards actually I could hold my breath. I didn't need to breathe immediately. I could just sit without breathing for a while. Yeah, I've not quite come across that exercise presented in that way. I like it.
I've been using it a lot. Obviously your breath work, you have a lot of experience. So for someone like you, I would probably encourage people, this type of experienced people to stay for a longer period. So on SoundCloud, I have this exercise recorded for a longer period, but obviously in respect of the time now, we just stayed for 2 minutes.
Sure.
It becomes also harder the longer time it passes.
What do you think the benefits of this breath are?
So I think, first of all, it slows down the breath and it slows down the volume of breathing, both of which I think they can be like, under normal circumstances, they should be low. I think, like I said, it improves concentration. That's why I say improve concentration. I have seen people that live very distracted lives to lose track of counting. It's not a bad thing, I say they can go back, but I think we all agree that, we live very distracted lives nowadays. So.
We do. Okay, Anastasis, well, we're coming towards the end of our hour now. So this is a conversation about inspire, and I do this because I wish to inspire people around breath work. And I, find and ask people who have inspired me, who I think who have an inspiring story to tell onto the show. So thank you for inspiring and coming on and talking about this. If there is, my final question is, if there is something that you could inspire in others, what would that be?
To stay true, it goes back to something we said earlier, to stay true to what their real calling is. They don't have to practice breathing. They don't have to practice yoga. But to stay true, to learn who they really are and stay true to that. Because if they have to make any transitions, any big challenges at the moment in their life, they have any challenges at the moment. I believe that a lot of people, the moment that we are recording this interview, a lot of people are going through a lot of pressure with the coronavirus in full outburst. I think if we are true to, we know who we are, we will get to where we want to go, and we will be quite centered and feel safe in the journey.
Well, Anastasis, thank you for sharing your journey from martial artist to paratrooper to financier to yoga teacher to breath work, Wim Hof breath worker to Patrick McKeown breath worker, and now Anastasis breath worker.
Thank you.
Your lesson of learn who you really are and stay true to that is a beautiful note to end on. So thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. We have another breathwork, Annie, the founder of Essence of Breath, appearing us on Thursday, and I've got some really other exciting guests coming up in the next few weeks. So you'll always be welcome as a guest, Anastasis, and hopefully I will have you back on again at some point. I've definitely got more questions I would love to ask you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, let's just finish with a breath together, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Thank you, Anastasis.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, everyone, for watching.